Well, perhaps let's look towards other areas because you use the word visible changes that we must have seen in the aviation sector, and you also talked about the airports. Let's start with that and see how that has actually made good business for operators in the industry. So what can you possibly tell us that have come in place that wasn't there before now, that has actually helped operators as well as air passengers have a good moment with our airports?
For a passenger or a traveler, 50% of his agro comes from his pre-departure process. Prior to a few years ago, we had airports that were pretty substandard. Not anybody's fault, but it's an evolution. In the past few years, one of the objectives of government has been to make the airports up to acceptable or reasonable standards. And this has improved the travel experience considerably.
But again, if you look at it, we have seen you're also a pilot, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, because of being a captain, you actually should also fly. Over time we've had some kind of difficulty by some pilots before now, some navigational and equipment and so many other issues with our airports. And perhaps maybe you should bring us up to speed and tell us what could make for easy flying now for pilots in the country.
No, forget that aspect of it. That was history. that was history. I will tell you officially, as a pilot that flies regularly, I still flew about 5 days ago. Yes, that the airspace systems in this country work. Navigational aids are present. And if you want, you can come, I'll take you up in the air. And we'll bring your cameras and we'll see it. Yeah, many years ago, there were challenges. But you see, a new generation of aviators has come up to take up the industry. And we're bringing it to international standards. So navigational aids work. The communication system works. The radar system works. The surveillance system works. The enforcement by the Civil Aviation Authority is brutal. And I mean real brutal.
Must be having busy skies. If we say all of this work, perhaps they should bring in more aircrafts coming or planes coming into the country. How busy can you say our airspace is?
It's busy to the extent of the number of aeroplanes that are operating. But in terms of capacity of what can be absorbed by or processed by the system, there's still a lot of excess capacity that has come into the airspace.
What would you, because you talked about very harsh environment for operators. I mean, it definitely will be something that is preventing a host of other operators from coming into the Nigerian climate. What would you say constitutes the greatest challenge for you as an operator?
Well, for all operators, it's economic. The economy not having access to long-term funds, the high interest rate. You see, this is a very capital-intensive business.
That's across the country for every sector, not just aviation.
We're
talking about the access to funds challenge, the short loans. Everybody faces it.
Yeah, everybody faces it, but it is not normal. You would not have very strong economic growth if you continue to maintain interest rates of 20%, 22%, 30%. It just doesn't make sense.
Despite the Aviation Intervention Fund.
Yeah, despite the Aviation Intervention Fund was just an intervention and it's over. That was meant to address the bad debts the banks were carrying. It did not really have much of a positive effect on the aviation industry.
Really?
Yes.
So can we assume that it was ill-conceived?
No.
What did you mean when you say it didn't?
It was well conceived, but it did not achieve the results. And I'm sure the people in government are working today to find a solution. Life is a continuum. We must not take everything negatively. We must act, assess, and decide.
What was it meant to have helped to solve?
Yeah. You see, I was part of the group that dealt with the presidential committees that was set up then to provide the intervention fund for airlines so that the average cost of capital will drop.
Is it for this one or during Fanuka this time?
The past one, during President Yaradua, which later manifested after he passed on.
Okay.
So, I mean, in spite of those challenges, you say that the operators are still doing their best and they're not cutting corners.
No, they're not cutting corners. Forget about cutting corners.
Because a host of people,
it's a professional business.
You know,
it's professional.
Captain, a host of people are aware of the challenges that you face for no fault of yours. And it's one of the reasons why, only recently, I think, in one of the budgets, that some parts of, if you're buying, parts for planes and, you know, I think they come in duty free or so, because those are part of the complaint. A host of people are aware of those challenges. Perhaps maybe the accidents in the sector have also brought this to the fore. But for you to say that, you know, that operators don't cut corners, a host of people will find that very difficult to believe.
No, operators don't cut corners. Operators are professional.
How then do they manage in spite of this, you know, no access to long-term loans?
You work within the constraints of your environment. It does not mean you break the laws. You see, the aviation industry is a very compliance-sensitive industry. You know the law of gravity. You will drop. And if you have such heavy investments, why do you want to risk it by cutting corners? It's very convenient for the layman, for the critics to come out and say people are cutting corners. Professionals don't cut corners. I still insist, professionals don't cut corners.
And you say, you maintain that you have a host, you have more professionals than quacks in the sector.
Of course. I mean, with those 8 critical elements that I explained to you, and the level of surveillance we have, quacks can't survive. That's why you have very few airlines in Nigeria now. The barrier of entry is high.
So is something being, you know, organized for you to also ease this, you know, burden of economic constraints?
It's a process, and you must understand that there are many areas any government will have to deal with.
Such as?
Agriculture, health, security. Aviation is not the only thing. But despite that, we are an industry. We are progressively getting better. At least now we have duty-free importation for our spare parts. We're trying to address the cost of fuel. We're doing so many other...
The cost of fuel is another...
Yeah, that's another major expense you go through. Because fuel is everywhere, or in most places, fuel is cartel controlled. But we're looking for a legislation now that will force down the price of fuel. But it's an evolution. It's not going to happen overnight. But meanwhile, we are obliged to work within the constraints of our environment. Safety is not a discussion. There's no negotiation about it.
How fast do you think that, you know, implementation of that master plan can move, considering the constraints that you currently face?
Depends on the government and our efforts and our capacity to engage government and let them understand what we're feeling.
And do you think the government is feeling the vibe of what you're feeling? They're getting the vibe?
I believe so. You saw the performance.
Because you seem to be very understanding of the fact the government has lots on its plate and you can wait.
Government is a constituted authority. As a citizen, you're obliged to respect government. You can engage government, you can challenge government, but if government does not understand what you are saying, and the only way you get people to understand what you are saying is by communicating. You understand it? So if government understands what you are, how did we get the duty free? Engagement, communication, understanding, and bingo, we got it.